Scotland is undergoing far-reaching reform of its wildlife law in the shape of the Wildlife and Natural Environment Bill. I asked Dr. Colin Shedden, Director of BASC in Scotland, what the significance of the bill is for shooting.
It will affect everyone who shoots in Scotland, and it will affect them in a very positive way. Let's start with the positives. It is going to reform all the old game acts, which means that no one in Scotland will require to purchase a game licence for shooting or taking game in the future, which is really good news for everyone. The poaching legislation is being reformed drastically. It's being simplified. All the 1830 acts are disappearing. So the poaching legislation in Scotland will be really simple, and it should help members if they are suffering from poaching. It will certainly help the police by simplifying the law, and they'll be able to identify who is and who is not poaching very easily. So these are some of the positives. Other positives affect game birds. For many years now, gamekeepers have been catching up pheasants in the month of February, for instance, when technically they shouldn't have been doing it. It hasn't presented a problem wildlife crime-wise or anything else. So what we're doing is legitimising that. Just now, it's going to be legitimised for 14 days, and we're arguing strongly that that should be for the whole month of February. So there are a considerable number of positives coming through, whether it's in game management, whether it's in deer management, and other specific land management issues such as muir burn. There'll be relaxation of the season there. So there are these positives. However, there are also some negatives.
Turning to the negative impacts of the bill, one possibility is that the use of snares could be challenged.
Yes, initially within the bill there were some provisions relating to snaring, which we agreed with. There would have to be testing of all those who wish to use snares before they could use them, and some other tightening up of the legislation. But it was all seemed to be acceptable, and we agreed with that. However, at stage 3, which will be in March, we do expect to see someone bringing forward a banning amendment which would seek to ban the use of snares in Scotland. And obviously we're encouraging all members just now, especially those like gamekeepers who use snares on a regular basis, to contact their MSPs and just point out to them how essential snares are for their pest management on the ground.
What are the likely implications for deer management?
Deer is one of the key components of this bill, and we were fortunate in that the initial bill featured a requirement for all those who shoot deer in Scotland to undergo training and assessment, mandatory testing for all deer stalkers in Scotland. We've been able to put that in the back burner. It will be reviewed in 2014, so there's no immediate requirement for mandatory testing in Scotland, fortunately. Other issues that we've been working on are very much in lines of deer welfare, and one critical amendment that was accepted at stage 2 simplifies the situation when deer are found in a starved or emaciated condition. Just now, you could dispatch that deer if you could prove that it was diseased. Under the new legislation, it will be enough to show that it is starving, emaciated, unable to move, so humane dispatch can be undertaken legally.
Stage 3 of this bill could be a very wide political arena where, for example, the use of snares could be put to a vote.
It would be put to a vote of all 129 MSPs. Just now we're not sure whether we do have a majority in favour. We certainly have a minister and the bulk of the SNP government that supports snaring. Conservatives support snaring as well. However, there are those in Labour and Lib Dem seats who probably have some opposition to snaring. That's why it's important that our members meet with them, explain the importance of snaring to their own individual use on their own shoots.
Where else do you think potentially damaging amendments could be brought in?
The interesting thing about this bill is that it didn't really feature many provisions relating to wildlife crime at the start, but wildlife crime has come to the fore through stages 1 and stages 2. At stage 2, which has just finished, we've seen amendments coming through. One from the government, which introduces the concept of vicarious liability. In essence, it means that anyone who employs or basically supervises one of their employees who breaks the law, such as poisoning birds of prey, not only could the gamekeeper or the employee, the farm worker, be found guilty of that offence, but it could also be transferred to the employer or the estate owner. It's a very new concept in wildlife legislation, but it's one that we can't really argue against because it's targeted at those who are breaking the law. The alternative to that, which was proposed, was to introduce a licence for every single shoot in Scotland. There could be 5,000 shoots in Scotland. That would be a bureaucratic nightmare if every shoot had to be licensed, and if that licence could then be taken away for any wrongdoing. So vicarious liability is probably much more preferable to any form of shoot licensing.
Finally, what's BASC doing, and asking its members to do, to try to make sure that shooting gets through the passage of this bill relatively unscathed?
As I said at the start, most of the provisions are supportive of shooting and quite positive, so there's very little that the members need to do. The big threat that we see relates to a possible banning of snares. So we're working hard behind the scenes with all of our lobbying, working closely with all the other land management organisations in Scotland, but individual members can, over the month of February, take the initiative themselves and speak to their MSPs and point out how important snaring is to them. It's obviously important that those who know something about snaring, actively using snares just now, are the ones that act as the key contacts with their MSPs.